Welcome to Compass Points, the podcast designed to help dentists and their teams find direction for peak practice performance. Have you ever thought about scaling your dental business? Maybe opening new locations, forming your own DSO? It's the dream of a lot of practice owners, and it's become reality for Dr. Peter Mclellan and his group in Kansas City. It took more than drive and ambition to expand from one practice to now 8. Dr. Mclellan insists his growth mindset still requires particular attention to his own compass points, a series of specific considerations he revisits and leans into every time his group expands. These are critical for you to consider in your own growth efforts. So here to share his strategy, his mindset, and his compass points with you, our driven dental entrepreneurs, is Dr. Peter Mclellan and your host, Samantha Jones.
Hello and welcome back to the Compass Points podcast. In 2016, I met a man named Peter Mclellan. Pete was this young dentist who had insatiable ambition and an extremely driven entrepreneurial spirit. I liked that a lot. It resonated and we quickly connected. My relationship with Pete has shifted and morphed over the years, but a few things have remained. A strong friendship, an open door policy to talk shop and business, amazing mastermind sessions, and always really good conversations. Pete is the owner of several businesses. I first worked with Pete as his practice management coach and then joined him on an adventure of a lifetime. Pete wanted to scale, and today I credit a lot of my own ability to scale my business compass to the things I learned while alongside Pete and his scaling adventures. You see, Pete wanted to go big. He wanted to go from single practice ownership to a multi-million-dollar multi-location entity. His vision was clear, concise, and downright awesome. So when he asked me to step on board as the Chief Operations Officer, I couldn't say no. I hopped on that bus and we went cruising. In 4 short years, I assisted, watched, participated, created, and contributed to the evolution of that vision. Today, that small business is now recognized as a DSO in the Kansas City area. Through a pandemic and in a few quick years, the business has quadrupled in its size, its profits, and its possibilities. It was an epic experience, and I am honored and delighted to have the one and only Peter B. in the house with me today. This guy is one to watch, and we are here to learn from his brilliance, his tenacity, and his strategic, abundant mindset. Welcome, Peter B. Isn't it surreal, dude? We are recording.
Wow.
It's crazy, isn't it?
That's quite the introduction and such a fun reminiscence.
Yeah, it is.
Time of growth, and I think so true to what we've talked about in finding your own genius. It's so clear to me that you continue to find your genius, and it's neat to see that bright light in you, and equally honored to get to chat and share that with the universe. So
thank you.
thanks
Thank you. Yeah, this is amazing. It seems very surreal to me that we are recording a conversation about your awesome business achievements on my podcast. It's wild. It's really rad. And I'm so excited to have you here today. You guys, he's my friend and he's taught me so much. So Pete, I want to get us started because I want to share you with our listeners. You have so many pearls of wisdom, and your journey has been awesome and crazy and wild and all of those things wrapped in one. So I'd like for you to just take a second and tell our listeners a little bit about you and where this all began. Like, where did this vision that you have, like, where did it start for you?
Certainly, yeah. So I grew up in the Midwest, son of a physician, and my mother was a teacher. And so a lot of the ideas around how I was going to spend my time as an adult in my profession was shaped by the things that were around me. And none of that really changed until I met my orthodontist, like many people who get into dentistry. And he seemed different. He owned businesses, he was very entrepreneurial, and he took a liking to me and gave me mentorship. His name was Steve Huber. a wonderful human, and bless his soul, he's since passed. But I think my journey into becoming the best version of myself was just finding believable leaders that saw something in me, that spoke to me. And so, fast forward after dental school, kind of after the military, I read a book called Cash Flow Quadrant. And Robert Kiyosaki gives an example of someone that is self employed, and a very successful self employed person is a dentist. And I thought to myself, well, I'd rather be somebody that is a business owner. And in order to do that, in order to create a business that ran itself, I needed to be around people that did that. And so I seeked that out. I leaned into it. And I had enough believable people that ran companies and they didn't actually go to a job. I didn't even know that that was a thing. And so that was kind of the impetus of pivoting what I thought was going to be a career filled with just becoming the best dentist I could, to then becoming a little bit more what I would consider mission driven in helping to maintain the autonomy of our profession through business practices. And so that's
Mhm.
really been the driver. A lot of the growth was seeing that even in dentistry, you could create a system that brought people in, grew them, and on the other side of it came profitability on multiple levels. So that's kind of where I got my start. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff. When you started, you were doing very traditional dentisting schedule. What has changed? So you started with like a traditional 4 clinical days a week, and now you have multiple practices and you're not doing as much clinical dentistry. Can you tell us a little bit about that part
Yeah,
of the evolution?
it's a huge shift, and I think, like, if I can give any advice to people listening that are interested in multi-doctor or multi-practice ownership, it's not for everyone. Not everybody should own multiple practices. A lot of times, people do it because they think there's gonna be more freedom, maybe more wealth created, and I think it's really important to say, like, find out who you are, really. For me, I figured that my highest and best use is not necessarily in the chair next to a patient. Now, I still love that. I still get to practice. It's a lot more fun that I don't have to practice anymore,
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
be transparent. To mean that the businesses provide enough income that if I just did that, it would be okay. And that was a cool point. But getting up to that point was a stressor. And what every dentist has to realize is that there are very few things that you're going to be able to do and create more value than what you can create with your own hands. And so, if your highest and best use, if it speaks to you to grow people, then it's okay to be a multi practice location doctor. But if that's not what you want to do, if you just want to focus on one patient at a time and not have critical conversations daily, then that's okay. Like, it's okay to do that. I think there's just been a lot of sexy talk around owning multiple practices. I don't have to tell you, it's not all, roses and sunshine. There's a
Mm.
lot that goes into it. And with 8 locations now, we're kind of getting the wind beneath our sails and integrating centralized systems from human resources management to controller processes. And I'm learning very much so that it's just a heavy load, a heavy lift of investment of money and time in order to get to the place where it's sustainable. And you were right there with us as we were doing it. So I get to practice 3 clinical days. That'll probably go down to two, more so because I enjoy growing the business and working on the operations and ensuring that the vision is followed.
I love it. That's really helpful. And I think I just like to key in on what you said when you first answered that question is that you really just have to figure out what you want and who you are. It's not all rainbows and unicorns, and it doesn't necessarily always translate to more money in that space. And so just deciding what your unique ability is and where your gifts lie and then using that to really figure out how you move forward. Scaling a business means so many different things in the dental industry. And when I was with you guys and what that meant in the path that we were on, I mean, we certainly did that. But that happens in other small town, one location ownership dynamics. And really, it's about, how do you want to scale your business and who are you? What are you best at? And how do you impact that scaling using those gifts? I love it. Okay, so tell us this for those listening. I mean, I think one of the most impressive things about you, Pete, is your drive and your ambition. I've admired that from the moment that I met you. And you've always been been very clear on what direction you're moving forward in. So tell us what 3 things you have identified. And if you cheat and there's like 4 or 2 or whatever, that's cool. What do you think people must have or must do if they're wanting to scale their business? I feel like you identified one in that last question, but
Mhm.
tell us more.
Yeah, so, I've been a very good mimicker of other successful people. That's been kind of the seed of my success is like if being ambitious, just be around other ambitious people. So with that being said, one of the advice that I got was to have a clear, articulate vision. There's a great book called Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold. It's very simple, easy read, and it sounds so silly, but actually articulating what is in your head on paper and sharing that with people can be tremendous value, so that you can have something to go back to each time you make a decision about, is this an alignment? Is it not an alignment? And you can feel free to change it, but it's really important that you're clear and articulate with it. So, in order to scale, you have to share with other people not only the why, you don't necessarily need to know the how, but the why, particularly, and what it looks like for you to be successful. So, clear, articulate vision's one. Something I've learned from you is having the right butts in the right seats. And that is a constant process.
Mhm.
The myth that, no turnover and this, that's not a real thing. And I think it's really important in our industry that we kind of dispel that, because
Mhm.
turnover can be a good thing. You
Mhm.
can have somebody in your organization that is the wrong butt in the wrong seat that goes on to figure out that, oh my gosh, I didn't even want to become a dentist.
Yeah.
I want to be a psychiatrist or something.
Right.
Like, you never know.
Right.
And so it's just like you have to have the seats defined and have the right people in those seats. And then I would say probably thirdly, in what we spoke to earlier, is like understanding your highest and best use of what you are. I think that book, Who Not How, is a really good articulated
It's a great book.
book that defines why that's important.
Yeah.
And if you have any ambitions to scale a business, like there's no really new ideas. It's been done millions of times. All you
Right.
have to do is just do what everybody else did, and then throw in the little magic spice of what your vision is and the why. And that's it. I
Yeah.
mean, it's fairly simple, but a lot of times people don't want to do that. They think that they know better, or they think that they're very unique. And unfortunately, I've just found that not to be the case. I think
Right.
just doing what other people did to get to those next levels, if you're scaling from 10 to 30 or 30 to 100 in revenue, like there's no way around it, whether it's in dentistry or making widgets in Malaysia. Like it's the same thing. It's the
Right.
same.
It is. I will tell you, I mean, I run a completely different business model in Compass, but a lot of what I learned while being in this space with you was it was scaling. It's this idea that can be emulated from business model to business model with some certain nuances here and there. And it just going back to what you said about vision, very little of what we do, at least in our industry, can be done alone. Really, in dentistry, there's nothing that we do in that business that is alone, that we do by ourselves. And if we are really wanting to move forward the business or scale it or grow it or do any of those things, we have to sit with the people that are on that journey with us and tell them where we're going. If they don't have a clear idea of why we're doing what we're doing and where that's going, it's going to be very difficult to define how we get there and to then take actionable steps to actually lead us down that path. So I think that starting with vision, I mean, your vision, I remember reading it for the very first time and just feeling like this is something I can get behind. It made sense to me. It was clear. And that's important. That's so important when you're doing something like what you have done and what you are doing. So I appreciate you saying that here with us today. What would you say is one of the biggest lessons that you have learned as an entrepreneur?
Oh yeah, a phrase that I caught from one of my performance coaches, and she's actually a dentist too. Is she would tell me all the time. She's like, "There's always a pivot." So it's when you're learning how to ski. At the minute that you learn that you know how to stop when you're going down a hill, and I've spoken to this before, it gives you a little bit of more confidence. And so
Hmm.
when you have these phrases that speak to you, like "There's always a pivot," then the permanence of a decision or the permanence of a path doesn't seem so scary. We all need this most people need a tremendous amount sense of certainty.
Hmm.
For me, I like to thrive on uncertainty, to be honest. And there's a lot of excitement around the journey of entrepreneurship and growing and scaling that probably is somewhat addictive. And so, if you have the understanding that there's not such permanence in your decisions, then your ability to pivot becomes even better. And I think the sooner that you realize that you have that ability, and the sooner that you realize that some of the stories that you're telling yourself are not true, then the faster and the easier it gets. And then you can identify situations more readily and move, you know?
I love that. That is a brilliant answer, and I appreciate it because I think a lot of what we do, just as in the human experience, is we move forward with a lot of fear in a lot of things that we do. And so, I mean, somebody once told me when I was trying to make the decision, do I go out on my own? Do I do this? Do I do this? What they said to me was, you just have to take that step and then that will appear. And if it doesn't, like, you're smart, you'll figure it out, you'll do something else. So having that, the ability to recognize that it's there's always a pivot is what can actually lead us down paths we never even knew existed because we have the courage enough to take them. So I love that answer and I think that's brilliant. Okay, so this is a question that I've actually never asked you before, and so I'm excited to hear your answer. I'm wondering, who do you most admire and why?
Sure. So for me, very entrepreneurial, very business minded. The people that I admire the most and who I like spending time with are actually artists in general. So artists, I think, are really unique humans that they sort of have the capacity to ignore the noise of, I would say, what kind of our capitalistic society says is what you're supposed to do. And they lean more into their creative sides, and they make things to share with the world. And I think like some of the most profound people in our lifetimes have been artists. So if I had to pick one person that I really admire more and more as I learn about them, it'd have to be silly enough, Fred Rogers, like Mr. Rogers.
I love it.
He's a pretty cool cat. He had some tenacity to him because he was very mission driven, and he wasn't looking to have like a mercenary mindset of trading time for money or being famous. His mission was very clear. His vision was very clear, and he was flexible on some things, but he had a lot of positive things to say and share. And he knew in his heart that that was right, and he never wavered his whole life. So he's a good study that people don't really mention, and I really admire him a lot. And I use some of his quotes throughout my vivid vision, and there's probably not a day that goes by that I don't say if it's mentionable, it's manageable. So I think that some of the simplest phrases from him were some of the most profound for me. And so I admire him. He was an artist. He was a singer. He was a songwriter. He was a creative. People don't know that about him. So I admire him a lot.
Yeah, and he had a really dope sweater game, so, you know.
He had a dope sort of name. And, he spoke out about things that people were
Yeah,
scared to speak out about, whether they realized it or not. I mean,
yeah,
he talked about race, sexuality, and things that nobody was talking about back then. So
yeah.
I admire him.
I love it. That is a great answer. I would have never guessed, but I should have. I know that he is in the Vivid Vision. I remember seeing his quote on the last page, and so he's a good one to admire. That's good stuff. Okay, so Pete, here at the Compass Points podcast, we have a signature question that we ask all of our guests. And so you get to answer the same question. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So, Pete, if you were a compass with 4 points of direction to give all of humankind, what would they be?
The first thing that came to mind when you say this is I think a lot about humankind in the form of relationships. So I think north is your relationship with your future. South would be the relationship with your past, and then to the right and left of you, the relationship with yourself, and then to the left, the relationship with your loved ones. And the direction in which you go is determinant on where you're most efficient. So if you need to go east, then that means you're leaning into your relationship with yourself. And that's the direction that you need to go. If you need to deal with your shit in the past, then you go south and deal with it so that you can move north. And I think a lot of life is about the relationships that we manage. So that
Mm.
that would be what I would share with people, because we're all here together, but we can't forget that that the person that we show up as is almost as important as the direction that we're going.
I love it. So true. Relationships, it's where it's at.
Mhm.
Pete, thank you so much for joining me today. I really want to honor this conversation today because my role and work in the DSO, it changed me. It gave me such perspective as an entrepreneur myself. I learned the art of scaling, not just the dental business, but business in general while I was there. I gained confidence. I leveled up my leadership, my communication, operational strategies. They had to take a priority. It was a paperless 4-year degree in entrepreneuring like a boss ass bitch. It was that role and that space that had the deepest impacts on my career prior to becoming an entrepreneur. I'm really grateful for that. I want to say thank you for giving me that platform to grow and blossom. I have always believed that it is your deepest desire to not only grow your business, but also the people within your business. I admire that, and I will be cheering you on each step of your journey. Before we go, speaking of perspective, we would love to invite you to the beautiful beachside town of Dunedin, Florida on January 13th, where we will be sharing perspective of these epiphanies I gained while working alongside folks like Peter Mclellan. We will be rolling up our sleeves and solving the communication breakdowns in your practice. We will help you become experts at taking your ideas to grow and improve your business all the way to implementation phase, and ultimately creating a super rad, well-oiled machine of a business. We know you have great ideas that often get dismissed and shoved aside. We are going to help you with a strategy to never let that happen again so that you can continue growing, all while creating a culture of happy, engaged team members. This event is brought to you by yours truly, Samantha Jones and the Compass team, and our awesome sponsor, Golden Proportions Marketing. To learn more, you can visit compassdps.com, and we hope to see you there. Until next time, be well, my friends.